Hello and welcome to my presentation. Today we will be tackling a dark and uncomfortable topic, the ethics of torture. Throughout history, societies have crossed the line into physical and psychological abuse, often claiming that it was necessary for the greater good. Today we are going to examine those claims and the reality of torture through a strict moral framework called deontology. We'll also be looking at infamous CIA black sites and Abu Ghraib to see if these acts can ever truly be justified. Here's going to be our roadmap for today. First, we will be defining what deontology is and Kant's categorical imperative. Then we'll be looking at the primary argument for why torture is still used today, the seductive idea that the ends justify the means. We'll be testing that assumption against the historical facts of the CIA and Abu Ghraib, apply Kant's three moral rules, and then arrive at a final verdict. Let's start off with what deontology is. The word stems from the Greek word of duty. Unlike ethical theories that judge an action by its results, deontology insists that the action itself is what matters. According to the McCombs School of Business 2018, we must follow a strict moral duty regardless of the outcome. For a deontologist, the end does not justify the means. If the action is fundamentally wrong, you cannot do it even if you think it will produce a good result. The most famous deontologist is Immanuel Kant. He believed that morality is based on pure logic and not human emotion. Kant introduced the categorical imperative, Matthews and Hendricks 2019. Categorical means without exception, and imperative means a command. It is an absolute moral law that applies to all human beings at all times. Kant gave us three specific tests, known as formulations, to figure out if our actions align with this absolute law. Before applying Kant's rules, we have to ask, if torture is inherently wrong, why do governments still do it? The answer is usually consequentialism, perfectly illustrated by the ticking time bomb scenario. The argument is that inflicting pain on one terrorist is justified if it saves a city. Fear drives this logic. However, the facts rarely support the fantasy. The 2014 Senate Intelligence Committee report explicitly concluded that the CIA's torture program was actually ineffective at acquiring reliable intelligence. Victims will often lie to make sure that the pain will stop. Still, the psychological allure of doing whatever it takes remains a powerful trap. To ground our analysis, let's take a look at recent history. After 9/11, the CIA held at least 119 detainees in secret black sites, using so-called enhanced interrogations like waterboarding. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence 2014. And further back in 2003, photographs from the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq revealed military personnel inflicting horrific physical and sexual abuse on prisoners. As philosopher David Sussman 2005 explains, torture is unique because it forces a victim's own body to betray them. This completely destroys their dignity. Now, let's see how these actions hold up against Kant's three tests. Kant's first formulation is the principle of universal law. Before you act, you must ask yourself, would it be rationally acceptable if everyone in the world acted in this way? Marek 2018 notes that this is the rule designed to prevent hypocrisy. We cannot create special exceptions for ourselves, such as saying torture is okay for our military to use, but a war crime if the enemy uses it on us. So, let's universalize torture. Now, imagine making it a universal law that anyone may inflict severe pain on another person to extract information or achieve a goal. If we do this, logic dictates that human rights cease to exist. Trust, justice, and safety would evaporate into a chaotic might makes right world. Because a rational person cannot wish for a society defined by universal violence, torture completely fails Kant's first test. The second formulation is the principle of humanity. Kant commands us to treat human beings as an end in themselves, and never merely as a means to an end. Matthews and Hendricks 2019. In plain English, you cannot use people like tools or objects. Because humans possess free will and reason, our value is intrinsic. You cannot exploit someone to achieve your goals, even if your goal is national security. Torture is perhaps the most extreme violation of the second rule. At Abu Ghraib, prisoners were not treated as humans. They were instead used as props for amusement and tools to extract confessions from. Sussman 2005 points out that torture bypasses the victim's rational mind entirely, using their physical agony as a weapon against them. When an interrogator tortures a suspect, they are treating the person purely as a broken radio that they are trying to tune for information. Because it obliterates free will, torture fails the second formulation. The third formulation brings it all together in the kingdom of ends. Kant asks us to imagine a perfect, ideal community where everyone respects each other as rational beings. The rule is that you should only act in ways that would be accepted as official laws in this perfect society. It is the ultimate test of mutual respect and legislation. When we look at CIA black sites, we aren't just looking at rogue individuals, we are looking at institutionalized, legally drafted programs of abuse. So you have to ask yourself, would a perfect kingdom of ends draft laws that would authorize secret prisons and waterboarding? The answer is obviously not. A moral community cannot legislate the systematic destruction of its own members' dignity. Therefore, torture fails Kant's final formulation. The final deontological verdict is absolute. Torture is always wrong. Governments may use fear or the hypothetical ticking time bomb to excuse their actions, but deontology cuts through the panic. We cannot universalize violence. We cannot treat human beings purely as tools, and we cannot build a moral society on a foundation of abuse. Our duty to respect human rights is absolute, regardless of the perceived benefits. To summarize, deontology demands that we stick to our moral duties even if we are afraid. While society justifies torture through the promise of security, the reality of Abu Ghraib and CIA black sites reveals a loss of our own humanity, and often a failure to even gather accurate intelligence. By applying Kant's categorical imperative, we see that treating human beings as objects is an absolute moral failure. Human dignity is not a luxury we can discard when it's convenient. As a matter of fact, it's our highest duty to ensure this never happens. Here are the references that supported this presentation. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you've learned something new.